Welcome, everyone. It's great to see you all this morning. I want to warmly welcome you both to this orientation session and also to Stony Brook. So we will get started. Before I jump into our presentation this morning, could everybody just give me a thumbs up to let me know that you can hear me and see my slides? Awesome, great. I will be honest, I see that little gray box in the bottom corner of my slides, and I don't know what that's about. I don't know how to get rid of that, but it shouldn't be in the way. We'll work around it this morning. So we are going to talk about navigating graduate school and specifically how to navigate the hidden curriculum of graduate school. And I'll talk about what I mean by that in just a moment. But first, I want to introduce myself and my team. So I am Molly Lotz. I'm the Director for Research Training Initiatives in the graduate school, which means that I support you all in exploring the training that you need to succeed in your research career, whatever that career looks like, whether you are thinking about a traditional faculty career, or you're thinking about applying research to other settings. I'm here to help you gain the skills you need to do that. And I know that in your academic programs, you'll be getting lots of wonderful research skills. But there are some things that we can support you in and supplement that you might not get as in depth in your programs. And so I am part of the Office of Graduate and Postdoctoral Professional Development. So broadly, we're here to support you in all of your professional development endeavors and to help you think about your exit strategy and your next steps for your career beyond graduate school. And our team is led by Dr. Kathleen Flint Am, who's our assistant dean. I'm also joined by Dr. Ashley Staples, who's our director for external fellowships and scholarly development. She works with Vernon Caldwell, who's the assistant director on that team. And together they are there to help you think about your external funding opportunities. So if there are fellowships that you want to apply for, other funding opportunities that you think you want to explore, they're a great resource for you in kind of putting that all together. And then, of course, we have our wonderful graduate assistant, Nicole Taylor Peters, who is a Doctor of Music student in flute and really supports all of the operations of our office. So you might get emails from her as well. And so today we're going to, as I said, we're going to define what this hidden curriculum is in graduate school and think about what are some of the unspoken expectations in academic spaces that you will want to know as you're entering into this, this graduate school space, this academic space. We'll think about resources for career development, how to navigate power dynamics, optimize mentoring, and communicate effectively so that you have the best chance of success as you're going through your graduate program. We're going to talk about metacognition and owning your own learning. We're going to think about some strategies for self-care, which is very important in embarking on any, major endeavor, graduate school included. And we're going to do a couple of interactive things just to build community because you all are starting together as a cohort, right? And so we want you to be able to get to know each other as well. So to get us started, I'm going to invite you all to just drop an emoji in the chat, or you can use your reaction button on Zoom if you know where to find that. That kind of represents how you feel about starting graduate school this semester. And then you can explain a little bit why you chose that thing. So, for example, you could put in a fire emoji because like you're fired up, you're super excited. You could put the like a grimacing face because you're excited, but you're a little anxious, and then, kind of tell us what you mean by that. Maybe you want to do something fun like the roller coaster emoji because it feels like a roller coaster, right? So I'm going to give us all a second. Again, throw it in the chat, use the reaction button, but just let us all know how you're feeling today. Okay, all right, Moses, you want to tell us in the chat why you picked that one? All right. Oh, Jasmine, excited. Looks like Dora, yeah, anxious. Okay. Got a lot of that. Excited and nervous. Love it. Yeah, totally understandable. Nora's got a thumbs up. Nora, does that mean you're ready? Oh, Gabrielle is excited. I see party poppers. Awesome. Manira looks a little hesitant, excited and nervous. Excited and nervous. Okay. All right, cool. So sounds like we're a good mix of excited and nervous, right? Those two emotions are very close to each other, right? So sometimes it's easy, like if you're feeling nervous about something, you can kind of repackage that as excitement, or vice versa. So they kind of go hand in hand. All right, great. Well, it's good to know where you all are. Hopefully, by the end of this session today, you will continue to be excited, but you'll feel a little bit less nervous about things. Okay, so let's get started. We'll start talking about this hidden curriculum and what I mean by that. Okay, so when I talk about the hidden curriculum, I want to first distinguish it from the formal curriculum. So the formal curriculum is anything in your graduate program that are like the courses that you're taking, the research projects that you're going to be embarking on, like your dissertation, exams that you're taking, internships, anything that is uh, described in the graduate catalog, right? That is the formal curriculum. That's the on the books curriculum. And so, in contrast to that, the hidden curriculum are the unspoken rules, the expectations and norms that influence who succeeds in in the program or in academic spaces, but they're not formally taught or openly discussed, right? So you're not going to find these things in the catalog or even on the website or kind of written down everywhere. They're kind of the like unspoken expectations. So some examples of what I mean by that are like how you build relationships with mentors in your program, right? There's not like a handbook necessarily for doing that. People might offer you guidance, but it's not kind of formally written down anywhere how you go about that. Um, so like when and how to ask for help from your advisors or your mentors or your fellow students. How to receive constructive feedback, right? How to navigate departmental politics, how like what your expectations are for publishing or networking or self-promotion as a graduate student, and then how to access resources and advocate for yourself. So again, these are all the things that you need to know to be able to succeed in your program and to be able to succeed in pursuing whatever career path is your intention. But they might be harder, especially if you're a first generation graduate student, or this is something new that you're encountering. These might be harder to figure out than kind of like what classes to take or what exams you need to register for. So these are kind of skills and cultural knowledge that students are expected to learn on their own or are traditionally kind of left to navigate on their own by observing people, by getting to know people, and kind of having a mentor who can guide you through it. But we want to kind of take the veil off of that. We want to make all of these implicit things explicit for you today and give you some tools to be able to figure this stuff out for yourself, because we know that there are some inequities there and also some difficulties. And just, when you're embarking on something new, it feels like you're drinking from a fire hose and taking everything in at once. So we want to do the best we can to help take some of that pressure off. And so if you're interested in this topic more, this topic of the hidden curriculum, it comes from this amazing book called A Field Guide to Graduate School, Uncovering the Hidden Curriculum. Um, and in that book, the author goes more in depth with the kind of things that I just mentioned with that, which, in other words, that students with prior exposure to academic culture, so like if you have a parent or a sibling who has gone through graduate school before, right? Or you have a strong network, you're more connected in these spaces than maybe your peers, right? That's an advantage in these spaces because a lot of this information is carried socially. And so if you have those social connections, you're probably in a better position than your peers who might not be as well connected or just don't know how to plug in. Right. But if you are on the other side of that and you feel like this is new to you, you don't have somebody in your family or somebody who's gone through graduate school before, you don't feel like you're well networked yet. What you really need to move through that are some strong resources and a plan to figure out what they are and how to use them. And just the determination to keep going and make it work. And so we can help you with that piece, and that's why we're all here today. So I'm gonna pull up a poll for us to respond to because again, I just want to see like where we are in the room today. So I'm launching a poll in your Zoom window, which asks, what do you have the most questions about as you enter your graduate program? A lot of you said that you're anxious and nervous, so I imagine that comes with a lot of questions and a lot of uncertainty. And so I want to hear from you, like what are the things that you're feeling the most uncertain about? And you might have a couple of these, but just pick the one that really resonates the most with you. And so I'll just give a minute for everyone to respond to that. Okay, great. I'm seeing folks respond to the poll. Great. Looks like we just have a couple more folks. Okay, I'm going to end it there. And so I'm going to put up the results here. So it looks like of these different categories, which include building mentoring relationships, securing funding, publishing, finding your career path, networking, completing coursework, writing support, and developing research skills. Um, Probably the biggest one that you is on all of your minds is building mentoring relationships. And that is honestly great news because that is a huge part of my job is to support you in doing that. So, and we have a lot of resources for you that go along with building your mentoring relationships and navigating that. So it's great if you're concerned about that, you're thinking about that because we have tons of support to help you figure that all out as you get started. And as well as for securing funding, I mentioned our team for external fellowships and scholarly development. That is their role to support you with that. And we also will have a lot of support and resources around finding your career path and building what's called an individual development plan, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, or an IDP, which is a great tool for you to help figure out what it is that really drives you and motivates you and that you want to make, build your career around. Completing coursework is, that's a challenging one too. The good news is that that happens kind of at the beginning and then you move through that in your program to, some of the other things. And so by the time you reach, the end of your program, you're going to feel really great about the courses that you've completed. And then research skills as well. That's another space where my office can offer a lot of support. So great. It's great to know what you all are thinking about. And I'll kind of, knowing this helps me kind of emphasize or pull back on some parts of this presentation so that I can ensure it's really relevant to where we all are today. Okay, I'm going to move us ahead. And we're going to talk a little bit about cultivating a growth mindset. Um, just as show of hands, how many of you have heard the term growth mindset already? Is that a familiar term to everyone? It's okay if it's not, because we're going to talk about it. Okay. We've got one, couple. Okay. All right. So a couple of you have heard this term before, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time on it right now because it is uh, such an important mindset to embarking on any new endeavor, not just a new graduate program, but especially a new graduate program. Anywhere where the goal is to learn something new, which, as we all said, can make you feel excited, but also nervous and anxious, right? And so it's about kind of shifting the way you think about the challenge you're approaching to set yourself up for the best chance of success. And so this term comes from a researcher named Carol Dweck, who came up with this idea of the growth mindset. And so the growth mindset is defined kind of in opposition to a fixed mindset. And so a fixed mindset is uh, the kind of thinking that, some people are just smarter than others, right? Like that there are these inherent qualities that make some people good at stuff and some people not good at stuff, right? And that can be a real challenge when you're coming up with something new, something that you're learning. Because if you feel like, well, I'm just not smart enough, I'm not, maybe again, going back to being a first generation graduate student, like I haven't had those experiences that some of my other peers had, and so I'm not going to be able to do this, right? That kind of thinking can really get in your way and not allow you to grow. Whereas a growth mindset kind of frames everything as a learning opportunity, a learning challenge, right? It understands that everybody is talented in many ways, right? Somebody else in your program who you think seems to be able to kind of navigate their coursework or navigate like building mentoring relationships a little bit better than you, right? They've had previous experiences that maybe have set them up better for that opportunity. But that doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to do that too. You just need to have, find ways to get that experience and use those resources as well. Right. So having a mindset that's like about I'm learning this, I'm trying this for the first time. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to not know things or to struggle through things, because that is part of the learning process, right? We cannot grow, we cannot learn if we don't also face challenges, because that's kind of where, just like when you're, if you go to the gym, right? If you stay on the easy weights the whole time, right? And you never challenge yourself, you're not going to gain any muscle. You're not going to get fitter. The muscle comes from like breaking it down, right? From encountering challenge and failure, right? And pushing through that to build yourself up. And so a growth mindset takes that same framework and applies it to just learning in general, right? Understanding that things take practice. It might take some time and effort, right? It might take making a few mistakes to help you learn from that. But by doing that, you'll be able to try a bunch of different strategies and eventually reach your goal. Okay. So I just wanted to put that at the beginning of the session so that we all are embarking on this journey together with this growth mindset in place, and to kind of encourage ourselves and each other to keep that at the top of our mind, because I think a lot of the cultural messages we get are around this fixed mindset, and that will get in our way if we're not reminding ourselves that our charge is to grow. Okay, and so related to that, I want to talk a little bit about just owning your own learning and thinking about the strategies and tools that you want to have at hand to start, learning new things in your courses or start building new research skills, and getting the most out of your graduate school experience. And so in terms of resources around learning, the Center for Excellence in Learning and Teaching is a really wonderful office here on campus. And you can reach them at celt@stonybrook.edu. They also have a great website that goes over their services. They have a lot of workshops available to you, some of which you might find interesting. A lot of things are, and also if you are a TA or you are going to be teaching as part of your graduate program, they have a lot of support for you in developing your pedagogical approach and gaining teaching experience. Also, if you're thinking about a faculty career later on and you want to build some teaching experience, they can help you do that. They can even do teaching observations for you to help you build some of that documentation for a faculty career path. So I will, I'll just kind of leave this here. I won't go too in depth of their services. I just want to make sure you know that they're a really great resource on campus. You can visit their website to check that all out. But they're an office that you want to keep top of mind for sure. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to show this video that is about metacognition. And so metacognition is kind of like learning about your own learning. And so we're going to watch this and talk a little bit about how you can get to know yourself as a learner so that you know how to support yourself when you're encountering learning new things. So I'm going to start the video. Just give me a thumbs up to let me know that you can hear it on your end once it starts playing.
Cognition is the realm of thinking.
Everybody hear it?
Metacognition is the realm of thinking about thinking. Not thinking about the phenomenon of thought in general or the nature of knowledge in the philosophical sense, but reflecting on your own thinking process. If cognition is what happens in your mind while you're engaged in learning, metacognition is what happens in your mind when you're engaged in monitoring and managing your learning. Consider painting a self-portrait. There are two levels of activity. There's painting, the touch of the brush to the canvas. Then there's metapainting, the painter's awareness and regulation of the painting. As the metacognitive painter reflects on his work, he draws on his knowledge of painting in several ways: an awareness of what colors complement each other, an understanding of which brushstrokes produce different effects, and the discernment of when to apply different techniques and use certain brushes to achieve the desired result. The reflective painter also manages his own painting as he goes along. He is mindful of how he plans to use the space of the canvas. He monitors his progress to make sure he is staying on track. And he evaluates his work, constantly checking that the paint on the canvas reflects the image on his mind and in the mirror. Whether it's painting or the knowledge and skills of any other discipline, we want our students to not only be critical and creative thinkers, but also to become reflective about their learning. As students face an ever-increasing demand on their attention and an ever-broadening world available for consideration, an important part of helping them think for themselves is helping them think about their own thinking.
Okay, so you might not have thought about your own thinking before, right? This might be the first time that you've really thought about how you approach learning or what you need to be a successful learner. But this is starting a new graduate program is a really great opportunity to think about that, and to think about how you can apply this metacognitive framework to your coursework, to your research projects, really to anything that you're doing in an academic space. And so this graphic that you see on the slide is about that self-directed learning. This is from an excerpt from a book called How Learning Works, and the citation is there if you want to check that out more. Of course, I will share these slides and the recording with you after the workshop today. So if you want to check out any of these resources further, you're welcome to. But as they kind of went through in that video, this cycle of self-directed learning, which you will encounter in graduate school, right? This might be the first time that you really are self-directing your learning. You are, unlike your undergraduate program, which was probably very structured, when you had a certain amount of courses, you had a certain curriculum that you moved through. In graduate school, you will have a curriculum to move through, but you also will have much more agency in pursuing your own inquiry, right? Pursuing your own research projects or the things that really interest you. And so you are going to be self-directing from this point forward. And so in this framework, this self-directed approach starts with first assessing the task at hand. So what is the project or the assignment or the research question that you're embarking on? Evaluating your strengths and weaknesses in relationship to that task. So like what parts of it do you know that you do very well? What parts of it do you feel like you have room to learn? Making a plan that maximizes those strengths and those areas of growth, applying the strategies that you have learned to that plan and monitoring your performance, kind of like checking in to see how things are going, and then reflecting and adjusting your approach if needed. So if things are not going well, you want to reflect on that and think about how it could go better. If things are going well, you want to congratulate yourself and move forward, right? And then it's a cycle, right? So this will all start again. That reflection hopefully kicks off another round of applying these strategies, and plans to the task at hand that you're working on. So that's kind of by metacognition and self-directed learning, that's kind of what we mean. And this framework can be applied to a number of different areas. So when you're thinking about applying metacognition to your courses, and I know a number of you were saying that starting your coursework was kind of top of mind today. You can think about metacognition in relationship to studying. So you want to avoid cramming, right? Because again, think of it as this whole cycle of learning. You're not going to be able to fit that into a few hours before your exam or the night before you have a paper due, right? It takes time to kind of go through those steps and to let that learning sink in. So you want to avoid cramming. You want to plan your life to around having time well ahead of an assignment or well ahead of an exam to really go through these steps. Having a peer study group can help with the assessment and reflection pieces, just to have people to bounce these ideas off of and give you some support. And then, of course, making a plan, as we talked about, was an important step in that process. And in terms of assessment, checking in with yourself regularly about the content of the course and your plan for completing it. Think about, like, is everything clear? Like, where are the areas where you're having some misunderstanding that you need to clarify something? Is there a topic that you need help with? How can you get those resources and support? And going through, like, once you take an exam and you've given your answers and you have your feedback back from the instructor, right? That is not the end of your learning process. You want to use that feedback to kind of take it back into that process that metacognitive process and internalize that feedback so you learn from it the next time, right? So you repeat that cycle and you start off the next cycle of learning a little bit stronger. So an example self-assessment question to ask after an exam is like, what steps, processes, or conclusions led you to choose the answer that you did, right? Is there something about your approach that you need to refine, maybe, or is there something that worked really well that you want to repeat the next time? And what additional factors, which could be confusion about the course materials, poorly matched learning strategies, or outside factors, contributed to your overall challenges? So is that something, again, where we can make an improvement for next time, or just to reflect on that a little bit so you start off the next cycle a little bit stronger. You can also keep a journal about your learning to again have that reflection and that metacognition. That journal can help you reflect on what you know and what isn't so clear, and develop some study strategies and write those down can be really helpful, and plan how to acquire what you may be lacking. So what kind of support do you need? What are the areas that you want to clarify? Writing those down can be really helpful just to get them out of your head where you have lots of other stuff kind of simmering in your head and onto paper. Just helps you kind of attack those things and make a plan about it. So that's in terms of your coursework. And then for those of you who will be going on to like teaching responsibilities, research, and even mentoring, this plan, monitor, evaluate steps, you can apply this to those areas too. So in teaching, for example, you can help your students plan, monitor, and evaluate. You can ask them about their goals, make sure you help them develop a really strong plan with explicit instructions and some study strategies. You can help them monitor by asking them to reflect on what was challenging and do some reflective journaling as part of the coursework, or have some discussions after a question. And then you can do some work with them to do some evaluation of what worked well, what could be improved. And there are some links here in the slides for some examples of evaluative activities that you can do with students. So again, I'll share those after the session today. And then you can also think about in your research, where are ways that you can apply this framework? Like what is your plan for your research project? How are you going to approach it? How are you going to monitor progress during your research? And how will you evaluate whether you are reaching, the appropriate conclusions, whether you're gathering the data that you need to succeed? So I'll leave it. We left that column blank because that's more for you. Your research projects will be more individual to you, and so that's more for you to kind of reflect on and make a plan. But just to know that this framework can be applied across a broad array of learning experiences and to really help you set yourself up for success there. And so also to kind of set you up for success, I'll talk a little bit now about our graduate student on-ramp, which is a few workshops and resources from my office that will help you get started as a graduate student. Before I move along to that, are there any questions or comments or thoughts about that metacognitive piece and anything we've talked about up to this point? No? All right, great. So, as I mentioned, I am situated in the Office of Graduate and Postdoctoral Professional Development, and we have resources that are designed to help you all with a number of things that you said were top of mind for you today. So, in terms of research skills development, which a number of you responded to the poll as an area that you're thinking about, career exploration and preparation, so thinking about your next steps after graduate school, professional communication and developing those skills of being able to talk about your research to a broad audience. And then also community and well-being and kind of staying connected in your graduate program. So thinking about planning your career, it's important to do, right? Yeah, you're in graduate school because you have a career path in mind. Maybe you don't know what particular job you're going to have when you finish, but you have a kind of field in mind that you are pursuing now, a specialized field of knowledge. And that's wonderful. And so we can help you kind of refine what it is about that field, or that particular research direction that you really love. Like what are the things that really motivate you as an individual to help you find a career path that's really tailored to fit you, and then make plans for how you can have the best chance of getting a job in that field and moving ahead. So there's a quote here that I really love, which is that our plans miscarry because they have no aim. When a man does not know what harbor he's making for, no wind is the right wind. So another way to say that you may have heard is like if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, right? Um, and by that, I just mean that, it might seem daunting, especially at the beginning of your graduate program, to have a plan for when you graduate, because you don't know what's going to happen in the next, 5 to 7 years, or around there, in the world. Like, students who started their graduate program in 2020 could not have anticipated, what was to come for them, right? There are factors that are outside of our control, and there always will be. And so if there's no plan that you're going to be able to carry out to the letter without any kind of larger interference, and that is true. However, if you have a plan, you kind of know what values and interests you have that led you to make that plan, right? You know what your goal is. And once you know what your overarching goal is, you know what harbor you're aiming for. That can allow you to be nimble and kind of adjust that plan as needed. But if you have no plan, if you don't know what direction you're headed, you're going to have a much harder time. You're kind of end up going where the wind blows you, and that may not lead you to where you want to be. So our goal in my office is to help you figure out what harbor you're aiming for, right? We'll help you with the planning part. We'll help you with the pieces from A to Z. But really, the goal is to figure out what direction you want to head in, and then you'll develop that ability to again be nimble and flexible as the winds change. And a really great tool for doing that is an individual development plan. So many of you might be required to do an IDP because if your graduate program, or if your graduate position is funded by the NSF or NIH, they require graduate students on those grants to do an IDP. But even if you're not required to submit an IDP to your advisor, we highly recommend that you create one because it's really your individual strategic plan, right? Just as universities and companies, right, have their strategic plan for what their top goals are, you want to have something like that for yourself to, again, identify what harbor you're aiming at. We recommend that you do an IDP once a year. And during that process, you're going to identify your long and short-term career goals, and then think about what actionable steps you can identify that will help you reach those goals. The IDP is also an opportunity for you to discuss these goals with your mentor or mentors, so they can give you feedback and help you adjust as needed, help you think about what your areas of strength are, your areas of growth are, and support you in connecting you to resources that will help you with those action steps. So the IDP is really the tool that you can use to develop your exit strategy into your next step from grad school. And even though you're just starting your grad program now and you're probably thinking about like, next week more than the next year, this is a great time to think about those goals, so that from day one, you can start to build toward them. So just like the metacognitive process, the IDP process also involves a fair amount of reflection and self-assessment. So that's really where it starts. You start thinking about your core values, right? The things that you really want to hold to, no matter what career setting you're in. These are the things that are really of deep importance to you. Um, you're going to think about what your skills are that you have now, where your strengths are. And you're also going to think about your interests, what your interests are. What are the things you want to learn more about and do more of? And once you have those in mind and written down, then you can use that as a jumping off point to do some career exploration and professional development. So think about what are the jobs that are out there, the career paths that are out there that fit your values and skills and interests, that you might want to set sail for. And once you identify some of those, you'll then be able to tell like what kind of skills, what qualifications do those jobs look for, right? What are they saying on the job ads that they want a new hire to have? And that will tell you where you might need to kind of have set some goals around that. Like, is there experience that you will need to get that job that you might not get as part of your graduate program? Is there another credential that you want to earn alongside your your graduate degree, like a project management certificate or something like that. So you'll set some goals to kind of accomplish those action steps. And then again, once a year, we want you to reflect on that again and do that self-assessment again. Have your goals changed, right? Have your values changed? Have your interests changed? And should your goals be changing along with that? And so we have quite a few resources to support you in developing your IDP, again, whether you're required to do it or not. And I recommend that everybody here start with the DIY tools that I have up on the slide here. So there are a few websites that offer this free IDP tool. It's kind of like a BuzzFeed quiz, if anybody remembers like BuzzFeed back in the day, but it's like a personality test, basically. It'll take you like 20 minutes. It doesn't take a long time, but it can really be helpful in articulating what, again, your values and your interests are. So a very popular one is My IDP. That's used by a lot of STEM graduate students and postdocs. There's also, if you're in chemistry, Chem IDP is another one. My personal favorite is Imagine PhD, which is geared more toward, they say it's geared more toward the humanities and social sciences, but I know a lot of STEM folks also find it really helpful. I just like that layout better than the others. So I recommend that you start there. And then if you want a little bit more support and community around creating your IDP, we have a workshop that we offer each fall and spring semester called Strategic Planning for Your Future, where we guide you through the steps of creating your IDP. So it's a little bit more in depth than those DIY tools, and you have a little bit more support and community around that. And so this is a great option if especially if you're required to submit an IDP, because you come in, it's 90 minutes, and you've walk out with it's virtual, but you finish the workshop with your IDP completed. And then if you want a little bit more or a lot more support and a lot more community around this process, we also have a program called the Exploring Career Ladders program. And the link is here so you can explore it later on after our workshop today. But this is a peer-led career mentoring program. It walks you through 7 steps of career exploration. So starting with an IDP and then refining your CV and materials for jobs, doing some informational interviews to pursue different career paths and see what interests you, and starting to actually apply for jobs. And there are students who have gotten jobs right out of this program, and it's become a national model for career development support. It's also just a great way to meet other graduate students across the campus. So if you're interested in that, registration is open for it each fall and spring semester. It's like a 0 credit course, and meets every other week during the semester for an hour. So that's a really great resource for you as well. So I mentioned our strategic planning for your future workshop. The next one is coming up on February 18th. So if you're interested on really kind of starting off the spring semester strong, you can register for that with the QR code. I'll give a second for anybody to grab that code if you want to. But again, you'll have the slides after today. And as I said, this is just an opportunity for you to just go through that IDP process with some support and guidance. Okay. Any questions? Any questions about IDPs before I move forward? Okay, wonderful. So now let's talk about that. That's sort of thinking about planning your career path. Now let's think about planning your research, and thinking about, if you'll be doing a dissertation or a thesis, or some other research project as part of your program, how you can start thinking about setting that up. So also each fall and spring semester, we have a workshop called Research Project Management, which, as I mentioned, like there are all these kind of research skills that you learn in your program, but that you also might need to supplement with like a little bit more support. So, and research project management is a great example of that, because this is something you do as a researcher. Every researcher learns to manage projects. But that learning is it's part of that hidden curriculum, right? Some of these skills, some of these approaches are things that you kind of learn by doing, but nobody actually really teaches you as part of the formal curriculum all the time. And so we offer this workshop as a way to kind of fill in that gap and help you think about how how we set up a research project from an administrative perspective, an organizational perspective, a metacognitive perspective, right? How you can really set yourself up well to embark on a larger research project because there are a lot of components, like administrative components, that you might not you might not get as much guidance with as the like developing a research question piece of it. So that workshop, if you're interested, it is coming up in March. So as we said, this is like an on-ramp. So we're doing this session in January. You could come to the IDP workshop in February, and that could be your next experience, your next engagement with us. Come back for research project management in March. And like then now you've really had like spent your spring semester setting yourself up well to launch into your graduate program a little bit more in depth in the fall. And so moving forward into mentorship, which again was something that many of you said you're thinking about, we also want you to be thinking about setting yourself up to be mentored and to mentor as you're starting your program. So when I say mentor, you might hear this term used interchangeably with like advisor or supervisor or PI sometimes, depending on your field. But what I mean by a mentor is something very specific. And this definition comes from the National Research Mentoring Network, or Norman. So mentoring is a collaborative learning relationship that proceeds through purposeful stages over time and has the primary goal of helping mentees acquire the essential competencies needed for success in their chosen career. And so that piece is very important, that last piece, that the goal of a mentor is to help you develop the skills you need for your chosen career. And so your mentor could be your advisor, but not is not always your advisor, right? Or it could be your PI or your supervisor, if those are terms you use, but not necessarily, right? You can also have more than one mentor, right? A mentor is just anybody who is helping you move towards those goals. So again, that's why the IDP is such an important mentoring tool because it's going to help you articulate what those goals are. And then you will be able to better communicate those with your mentor or mentors so that they can help you, again, acquire those essential competencies. So I want to take, since I know mentoring is on a lot of our minds, let's just take a moment now to think about what our mentorship needs are in this moment as we're entering grad school, as we're entering our grad programs. So I'm going to ask us to take a moment to think about one important academic or career goal you want to achieve in this academic year. So by January of 2027, by next year, what's one thing you will want to have accomplished? So just take a minute. You don't have to share that piece. Just take a minute and like jot it down on a paper next to you. Just think about that, what that is. Okay, so once you have that clear, either on your paper or in your mind, I want you to write down about three things that you need from a mentor to help you achieve that goal. So, what is one way that a mentor can support you in accomplishing that goal? So, I'll give it again a minute to reflect on that, and then I would like us to share in the chat what we came up with. Okay, so who would like to share either in the chat or by coming off mute? What's one of the things that you need from a mentor in this next year? It could be navigating the requirements for your program, something like that. Oh, detailed feedback on my thesis plan. Excellent. Yeah, feedback is a great resource, great mentoring resource to help me find my future specialization for the PhD. Okay, so to find a research direction, another great role that a mentor can play. Do we have one more, maybe one more person to share?
Hello.
Hi, Anthony.
So one of the things I hope to get out of having a mentor is just build greater relationships and connections with people in the field I want to go into, which is the PA graduate program. So
Mhm.
hopefully a mentor will be able to allow me to gain more connections.
Wonderful. Yeah, networking is another great role that a mentor can play. So it's worth taking time, again, maybe using your IDP as a starting point to really reflect on what what is it that you need from a mentor, because that will help you be able to identify and establish some of the relationships that you can leverage to maximize this mentoring support. Okay, so I'm going to move us ahead. And again, as part of this graduate student on-ramp, we have a full workshop geared around developing your mentoring skills. So we offer research mentor training, which can help you, for graduate students especially, help you develop your skills both as a mentor, right? Because many of you might be already or will be starting to mentor undergraduate students. And as you move forward in your career, you might have more and more mentoring experience, but also as a graduate student to be able to mentor up and make the most of the relationships that you have with your mentors to get to have these needs met. Um, so the graduate school offers this workshop. It's based in a curriculum from the Center for Improvement of Mentored Experiences and Research, or you might hear me call it SIMMER. That's kind of how we refer to it. Which is like the SIMMER curriculum is like the gold standard of mentor training. And so it looks really it's a great resource for you to have that here at Stony Brook, and looks great for you to include this experience on your CVs and funding proposals. So you definitely want to engage with this at some point while you're here as a graduate student. And it's great to do it early on in your graduate program because again, it's going to help you develop those skills and approaches to embark on these mentoring relationships that you're going to use to accomplish your goals during your program. So we're offering it next in February. It would be great if you would join us in February to do this. But if that feels like the timing is not right for you, we offer it twice a year in the fall and spring semesters. Um, okay. So that's kind of our graduate student on-ramp again, like starting with this navigating the hidden curriculum session, moving ahead to the IDP strategic planning session next month. Research project management is a great workshop to help you get set up, and then research mentor training as well. Those are the kind of key workshops we think are really going to create a strong foundation for you to embark into your graduate program and set yourself up well. Any questions on those before I move ahead? Okay, wonderful. So now I want to talk a little bit about academic jargon because this is definitely a part of the hidden curriculum. And each field has its own specialized language. Just as you all have specialized knowledge in your fields, you all will encounter terms in your disciplines that might be unfamiliar to you as you're starting out. And so we're going to think a little bit about how to encounter that. And I have another quick video here just to share.
Academic jargon. Jargon refers to the specialized words or phrases with specific definitions that are shared by people within a certain field. While jargon can be very useful, its use can also exclude people from information or resources. Think about medical terminology that you might hear in a hospital. To medical workers, their use of jargon brings clarity to the situation, but to a patient, it can do the opposite. So why does jargon exist in the first place? Let's use a cooking example to illustrate how it works. Saute the onions is another way of saying heat a little oil in a pan over medium heat, add the chopped onions once it's hot, and cook until brown. But it's easier and quicker to say saute than to describe the whole process in every recipe. It's also easier to memorize this process when you have a single specialized word for it. When you're learning new terminology, it's not just the memorization of a definition. It's about using that specialized word or phrase to understand and remember the bigger idea that it summarizes. This is just as true in research communities. Jargon is used to describe complex ideas more efficiently, and new jargon is created to summarize things that may not have succinct names yet. After all, it's really difficult to learn about something if you don't have a name for it. When people don't have the terms to define something clearly, they might even believe that it doesn't exist. Kimberly Crenshaw discusses this in her TED Talk, The Urgency of Intersectionality, stating, "Where there's no name for a problem, you can't see a problem. And when you can't see a problem, you pretty much can't solve it." Jargon can get confusing when an everyday word like intersection also has a very specific meaning that defines a very specific problem. For example, if I'm using Crenshaw's theory of intersectionality to understand how intersections of race and gender affect beauty norms, my use of intersectionality has a more complex definition than if I'm using the word to describe a location or provide directions, like meet me at the intersection of Perry and Turner Street. This need to describe complex system of ideas with just one word or phrase is why you run into so much jargon throughout your academic career and beyond. Knowing the words that experts use to describe something will also help you search for more information about it. So the next time you're faced with new vocabulary, consider, when is jargon useful and necessary? When is it just being used to exclude people from conversations or information? And how can specific words help you unlock broader concepts?
Okay, so as this video explains much more gracefully than I can, there's a role for jargon, right? There's a reason that we have this specialized language, and it's an important part of the research and the learning process. But it can be kind of intimidating and can be confusing for somebody who's entering into that field, at the kind of ground level as a new graduate student. So we're going to think about like how we kind of navigate that that uncertainty of encountering terms or concepts that we're not familiar with. So the kind of key takeaway here is like it's okay to ask, like it's okay not to know what somebody means by something, right? And I know that that can feel hard, especially when something is unfamiliar and you want to kind of like you're getting into the program, you're getting into the department, and you want to you don't want to draw attention to yourself by showing that you don't know something. There's a lot of peer pressure around kind of being in the know in academic spaces, which again is part of that hidden curriculum. Um, but it really is okay to ask. So if you're confused about something, somebody else might be too. And so you're doing the class or the research group or, whoever else is around you a favor by asking for clarification. And your professors are human too, right? They often have what we call the curse of knowledge, which is like if you are somebody who has been in a field and has a high degree of specialized knowledge, right? It is hard to think about what somebody who is unfamiliar with that space might not know, what you might need to explain. So even though your professors are experts in guiding you through this specialized field that you've chosen, they might miss a step or two in terms of explaining and bringing you along with them, just because their level of knowledge is so high. And so they likely will appreciate you asking for clarification and helping them understand where they maybe lost you along the way. I, acknowledge that asking can feel risky, right? Like I said, there's kind of this peer pressure around being in the know and having, a level of expertise in academic spaces. So if you feel like it's not the moment to ask, you can maybe reach out to somebody else on the side, like reach out to someone you trust. This is another great role that a mentor can play for you, like having somebody who you can go to ask, like, hey, I didn't understand this thing, or like when she said, zeitgeist, what did she mean by that? To have somebody you trust who can help demystify some of these concepts and terms for you can be a really great mentor to have in your corner. And so I wanted to hear a little bit from you all now, like in you, because you all are coming from different disciplines and different fields. So what are some examples, like everybody, if you could throw into the chat, like what's one example of jargon that you have encountered in your field? And this could be a term that you know now, but maybe you didn't at one time, or you just think it is like, a funny term, something like that, or something that somebody outside of your discipline might not understand. So I'll just give why. So my training is in English and literature, and one jargony term that I hear often in my field, but not usually outside of it, is reify, reify, which is kind of like to bring something into being by imagining it. Um, and I completely understand why that term exists because it describes a very specific thing. But I also know that if I use it with somebody who's outside of my field, I'm gonna kind of lose them. Like they're not gonna be able to come along with me in what I'm explaining, and they're gonna need a little bit more introduction to that term. So I'm gonna turn it over to you all now. So just throw into the chat what's one term, and just let us know what your discipline is, what your program is, and share one jargony term that you can think of. Anyone? I'm sure we can think of a couple. No wrong answers here. Cookies. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. Uh, acute myocardial infarction, right? Heart attack, right? Those are great examples. Yeah. Yeah, and exactly like cookies would mean something very different to me in a different context, but it has a very specific meaning in computer science. So great examples. Oh, bug. That's another one. Yeah. Has a different meaning outside of the fields. Shift the gear. Okay. A good one. Yeah. That's a new one to me as well. All right, so let's talk now about something that's equally important, which is taking care of yourself in graduate school. Hopefully, you're practicing good self-care in all areas of your life, but knowing, that there are a lot of pressures in grad school, right? As we said, where you're all learning new stuff and embarking on new experiences, and that brings a lot of stress with it. And maybe you're also balancing this with a job outside of your program, with families, with other pressures, with work. So you want to think about how you manage all of these responsibilities and all of these new things that you're learning while also taking good care of yourself so that it's um, a sustainable endeavor. So there are, as I said, there are some pressures in academic culture traditionally. Hopefully, some of these are going away and being challenged in various spaces, but traditionally, academia is a culture that glorifies overwork, right? We all know somebody who, talks about like being in the lab late at night, or being in the library late at night, or emailing after hours, right? But that doesn't mean that that has to be you, right? And I hope we all know that self-care isn't an indulgence; it's really a necessity to be able um, to make your scholarship and your career development sustainable. So you want to reframe just as, again, as we have this growth mindset that we carry forward. We're not going to be perfect every day, right? Perfection is not the goal, but progress is the goal. And being able to stay grounded, being able to stay human while navigating a demanding and sometimes isolating environment, right? Especially if your research takes you off by yourself a lot. You know, having all of these practices in your back pocket are going to be really important to you. So we're going to talk about some categories of self-care. I'm going to go through this a little bit quickly, but I just want to touch on all of these different areas where I hope that you all are thinking about building in practices to take care of yourself as you're getting started, because they'll be very important to you as you continue forward. So first, I think about your mental and emotional self-care. Setting boundaries around your work hours can be really important, especially again in graduate school. It's not a traditional 9 to 5 pursuit, right? You might be working at odd hours, on the weekends, things like that. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't have boundaries around when you work. And your boundaries might be different than, one of your professors or another student in your program. But nevertheless, you want to treat grad school like a job, right? Avoid, and with a 9 to 5 job, right? You shut it down at 5 p.m. on a Friday and you make sure that you have a weekend so that you can rest and recharge and come back on Monday morning ready to go. So whatever that looks like for you in your week going forward, you want to think about building it yourself in that time to rest and recharge daily and also weekly. Avoid pressure to always be producing, because the reality is your brain is just going to work better if you give it time to rest and recharge. Also normalize asking for help. We talked about this a little bit, but you're here to learn, right? You should not start graduate school expecting yourself to already know everything, because then what would be the point, right? You're here to learn. It's okay that you don't know things or terms that people use, because you're just getting started, and approaching everything with that growth mindset is going to just make your learning that much stronger. Whereas if you approach it like a fixed mindset, and get down on yourself for not knowing something or being unfamiliar with things, that's going to mean that you don't ask questions, you don't try to learn, and that's going to just get in your own way. And going along with that, self-compassion for making mistakes. We all make mistakes. We all encounter things that are unfamiliar, and we try something and it doesn't work. Just be really gentle with yourself when that happens, because that is part of the learning process too. And recognizing imposter feelings. And by that I mean, there is, everyone who does something difficult or feels like they don't belong in that space, right? Uh, Imposter syndrome or imposter fears are very common in academia. So if you feel at times like you don't belong here, know that number one, you do, and number two, the person next to you probably feels that way at times too. So being able to normalize that, to talk about it and reflect on it in a gentle, compassionate way, is what you need to do in those moments. And thinking about how you set up your time and your energy, again, your grad school is not a 9 to 5 job, right? So it's not like you're already going to have structured hours in the day to do your work. You also, as you encounter your own research projects, will have more and more agency about how you are setting up your time. And so you want to do that well, so that you can manage everything that you need to do, and make the most of not only the time you have available, but the energy that you have available to commit to these projects. So think about planning and what are the tools that will help you plan your time. So some people prefer a paper planner. Some people use digital tools, like we have access to Google Workspace at Stony Brook. So you might want to use Google Calendar. Was a really great tool for kind of mapping out your days, just to give yourself a little bit of structure in how you plan. And also apply that structure to your breaks and your time off. Like we said, you shouldn't always feel like you need to be producing and feel like you need to be working. Make sure you're scheduling time for yourself just the way you would schedule a meeting. Make sure that you have, if not a traditional weekend on Saturday or Sunday, some other kind of space in the week for you to rest and recharge. And make sure you put that on your calendar so it's like a commitment to yourself. Breaking large goals into manageable chunks to avoid burnout and procrastination, right? So you're not going to, if you have a research paper to write, you're not going to just write research paper on your to-do list. You're going to think about what are the components that the small steps that will take you toward that larger goal. Just like your IDP, right? You're going to think about your large career goal, and then you're going to think about what are the small actionable steps that are going to get me there. And that's going to help you actually do those things, right? Because it's easier to kind of take that small jump than a huge leap. But it's also going to help you just offload some of that stress around those large goals, because you'll know you have a plan for dealing with them. And then also, like, celebrate. You're going to have it's going to be a lot of hard work, but you're going to have some wins along the way. And you want to take the time to celebrate those wins, right? So if you finish a draft of a paper, or you get a great grade on a test, or, you did a new thing for the first time, and you accomplished it, like, either have that celebration with some friends in your class or your research group, like use that as an opportunity to connect, or just have a little, a little treat for yourself. Like, but make sure you're marking those wins because that's what's going to keep you going, even when the things are challenging, right? You're gonna remember those positive times. Physically, you want to make sure you're taking care of yourself as well. And I know that this is a hard thing to find time for. Um, make sure that you get enough sleep, right? Even when you're juggling a lot, even when your days are very full, make sure that you're getting adequate sleep at night because it's just an opportunity. It's just going to make your brain work better, right? It's important for all that learning to sink in to make sure that your brain can rest. Move your body in a way that feels best for you. So even like if it's 10 minutes, just to help reduce those stress levels, finding some kind of movement that you enjoy and that feels good is going to be important for countering stress. Um, Eat as regularly and nutritiously as you can, right? Not just coffee or energy drinks or whatever you use to caffeinate yourself. And if you experience food insecurity as a graduate student, know that there are some resources available to help you with that. I know that that is a common challenge that graduate students face, especially when you're balancing multiple things. But just make sure that you're making food and nutrition a priority because that's going to be your fuel to keep you going, as well as staying hydrated. So just have that water bottle, keep it with you, make sure that you're checking in with those basic needs, because that's going to help you do the hard stuff. And then also making sure that you're socializing. This can be, graduate school can be a little bit isolating, especially as I said, as you get and move into the research phase of your program. If your research is kind of independent research or I know for my graduate program, the way that graduate study in the humanities is set up is like you're just working on your project in the archive alone, right? So by the time you have moved through your coursework, like hopefully you've made some friends that you can check in with regularly, but there's no kind of structure around socialization the way that there is in like an undergraduate program. So building that peer support network and finding people that you can connect with, get support from is really, really important. And going through coursework is a great place to do that. And just make sure you don't neglect your non-academic connections as well. You still need to connect with family and friends, people who are away from work, away from your graduate program. That's an important balance. Um, and for the people who are in your program, you can multitask, right? You can have a peer study group or, support each other, go out together after, a particularly hard exam or something like that. Find ways to connect even as you're accomplishing your goals. And this one I think is equally important, making space for your hobbies. It's really easy, especially when you're balancing graduate school with, maybe work and other responsibilities for those things to consume all of your time. But it's also really important to have some creative hobbies, like some things that are not just work. So whatever it is you like to do, you read for fun, you like to cook, you like to, play a sport or something, like make sure that you're building in time for those things as well as mental health days and, rest, not just to sleep, but also just to recharge and enjoy things outside of work. Get outside when you can. Um, and then, also space for yourself to disconnect, right? You don't always have to be on your email or on Slack or responsive, you can have time to unplug. That's important too. And so going back to that growth mindset or like the imposter fears that I talked about, one way that you can really care for yourself in your graduate program is developing the skill of challenging the cognitive distortions that come up. Again, this is a natural, normal thing. When we encounter something new, we encounter something challenging. We can tend to, catastrophize a little bit, right? And feel like, especially if you're going to things with a fixed mindset, and you feel like, like this is too hard for me. Like I'm never going to be able to do this. I'm never going to be able to understand this concept, right? I feel like my advisor gave me all of this harsh feedback. I feel like they hate me. Um, Having a way to kind of challenge those thoughts, and maybe you have some other support, family support, or, peer social support around you to help you challenge some of these cognitive distortions, that will help you kind of reframe these things and think realistically and be able to deal with the challenges that really are in front of you, not just the ones that are building up in your mind. Having that growth mindset is a really great way to do this as well. So you want to think about like, okay, so you feel like your advisor hates you. Do you actually have evidence of that, right? Or, if you think I'll never understand this or I'll never be able to get this experiment right, like think realistically about like what if you don't get it? Like what is the worst thing that could happen, or what are the next steps from there? Um, just helps you kind of reframe these things, and to not get kind of bogged down in these cognitive distortions that can really take you off track. And then if you feel like you need some additional help, just kind of checking in with your wellness, with your self-care, we have resources available on campus, including CAPS, or counseling and psychological services, and they have both group support and also individual counseling. We also have a Krasner Psychology Center, which has, for a small fee, some kind of therapy options for you. And then, of course, through your health insurance, you have access to mental health support or therapy. There is also Timely Care, which is a virtual healthcare option that's available for students on campus. And so you can download that app, and that's a great resource for you to access, and it's 24/7. So that's a really great option. And then again, if I know you'll have a lot of things to read and to do, and you have a lot to fit into your weeks now. But if you want to start thinking about thinking ahead to the next steps in your program, or the next steps in your career, or just reflecting more on this hidden curriculum and your experience in graduate school, there are some books out there that really go into this topic more in depth. So one is we're called Where Research Begins, and this is a really great resource, especially if you are going to be writing a dissertation, that can help you choose a research project that really aligns both with your values and your interests and has impact on the world, and importantly is realistic to accomplish, right? So one of the really helpful things that they move you through in this framework of selecting a research question is like how to work with the resources that you have to build a project that is impactful. And so, thinking about like, will you have access to travel? Will you have access to research funds? Like what really is going to be a goal that you can accomplish in terms of your research project? It's a great kind of multi-step framework to think about that. I mentioned A Field Guide to Graduate School. That's a great book. And then also the Latinx Guide to Graduate School can, if you're part of that community, can be a really helpful resource, as well as the Black Academics Guide to Winning Tenure Without Losing Your Soul, which also talks about, moving in academic spaces when when you're part of a group that has historically been marginalized in those spaces. So I just wanted to put that there in case you wanted to explore any of these topics further. And now we'll just talk briefly about where you can go for help if you need anything further as you're moving through your program. So first, hopefully you all have done the online orientation through the graduate school. So this, in our orientation today, we're talking about the things that are a little bit more abstract about your orientation, thinking about the things that like aren't written down somewhere that you want to be thinking about and reflecting on as you start grad school. But the online orientation will go through all of the resources that you have available on campus. So you really want to make sure that you access that. And it will have a ton of information for you there that you'll just want to keep as a reference moving forward. Also, I want to make sure you all know about the Ombuds office. So our Stony Brook University Ombuds is Donna Bueller. And then the role of the Ombuds is to act as a confidential, impartial, and independent resource for you for really any challenge that you're facing. So let's say you're having an interpersonal issue with maybe an advisor or somebody else in your program, or you feel like you have you're dealing with a challenge on campus and you're not really sure where to turn for help. the ombuds is probably the place that you want to go, because they, number one, are neutral, so they are not like the ombuds does not take any side. They're totally confidential, right? I've been in Donna's office and I know that she doesn't even write down the names of the people that she meets with. She has a little paper notebook where she writes down some things like that she might need to remember about a conversation to take next steps, and then she shreds that paper when she's done with it. So there are no records kept of your conversation. So if you're, concerned about, repercussions of having this conversation with anybody, know that she is completely confidential. And she's independent. So she doesn't, she's not beholden to any other party in the university. She's there really to support you. So that's just a resource to bookmark. Again, hopefully you will never need something like this, but knowing that it's available to you if you do need help with anything can be really important. And of course, my office can help you with anything, career or research development related. Anything with mentoring. The Center for Inclusive Education is another really great resource with a lot of workshops, a lot of funding support as well. I mentioned the Center for Excellence in Learning and Teaching. And then there are a couple of there's the Graduate Student Organization, the Graduate Student Employees Union. That is a great support to graduate students on campus, as well as the International Student Success Office. The Student Accessibility Support Center. So if you need any kind of accessibility accommodation, you want to check there. And as well as the Writing Center and Career Center for even more writing support and career development support. And so with that, I just want to extend a very warm welcome to you all to Stony Brook. We have a brief evaluation survey about this workshop that I would be grateful if you all could take. There's a QR code up on the screen. As I mentioned, I'm going to send the slides and the recording out to you all so that you have these resources handy and you have links that you can follow to explore further. But I just want to thank you all for coming today and for being so engaged. And I wish you all the best of luck next week as you get started with your classes. Thanks. So you're free to go. I'm going to hang around for a minute or two in case you have any questions for me, but otherwise, have a wonderful rest of your day.
Have a great day. Thank you for the presentation.
Thanks, Anthony. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
Yeah, thank you, Molly. Have a nice day.
Have a nice day.